All right, so today we're diving into The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and you've sent over some really interesting stuff about it, so I'm excited to get into all the little details of this story.
Yeah, it's a really great novel. It's a journey. We follow this boy, Theo Decker, and his life changes forever when he's just 13.
Okay, so let's just start right at the beginning. What's his life like before everything kind of goes crazy?
So Theo, he's living a pretty normal life, in New York City with his mom, Audrey. And they're really close, and they both share a love for art, especially those Dutch
Okay,
masters.
so it sounds pretty idyllic. What happens to disrupt this peaceful life?
Well, things take a pretty dramatic turn when Theo and his mother visit the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art,
Yeah.
to see this special exhibition, and it features the Goldfinch. It's a small but super valuable painting by Carel Fabricius.
And this is where, like, the tragedy happens, right? Tell me about the bombing.
Yeah, so there's a bomb. While they're at the museum, it explodes. And it causes just total chaos. And Theo's mother, she's killed in the blast.
Oh, wow. So how does a young boy even begin to cope with something like that?
I mean, he's completely in shock, disoriented, and in the middle of all this chaos, he runs into a dying man who points him toward this small painting, the Goldfinch, and gives him this cryptic message about Hobart and Blackwell.
Wow. So he not only loses his mother,
hmm
but then he's thrown into this really confusing situation. What does he do?
Well, he's driven by, grief, confusion, and maybe even subconsciously that message from the dying man. He takes the painting
Mm.
and leaves the museum. He goes back to his apartment, but it's empty. And that's when he actually learns about his mother.
Oh, gosh. So the painting becomes this, like, symbol of his loss and a reminder of this horrific event. So where does he go from there?
Well, his father's absent from his life. So Theo ends up being taken in by the Barbours. It's a wealthy family, friends with his mother. And he's just trying to figure out this new environment while silently dealing with losing his mother and, the stolen painting.
So he's carrying a lot emotionally. I mean, does he try to, like, understand what happened back at the museum?
He does, yeah. So one night after taking a sleeping pill, he has this flashback to the dying man's words, Hobart and Blackwell. And he needs to figure it out, so he sets out to find them.
And what does he discover?
He finds out that Hobart and Blackwell, it's an antique shop. And there he meets Hobie, a kind, gentle antique restorer, who it turns out is the business partner of the man who gave Theo the painting and that cryptic message.
Okay, so there's a connection there, but does he tell Hobie about the painting?
He doesn't. No, he keeps it secret. However, he does see Pippa again at the shop. You remember that red-haired girl from the museum?
Yeah.
Well, she's the niece of Hobie's business partner, and she was also hurt in the bombing.
Wow, what a coincidence. Seems like fate is kind of, bringing them together. What's their relationship like?
Well, they form a bond over, what they both went through, losing people. But Pippa ends up moving to Texas to live with her aunt, and Theo's left behind again.
Another loss for him to deal with.
Oh.
So what's his life like with the Barbours?
It's complicated, He has stability and kindness, especially from Mrs. Barbour. He reconnects with Andy, a boy his age, and he gets to know the rest of the family. But it's a world of privilege and order that's so different from what he knew.
But he's still haunted by everything that happened at the museum
Right.
and the painting he took. Does anything happen to disrupt this, like, newfound stability?
His dad comes back, Larry Decker, and that kind of throws everything upside down.
Oh, we know he wasn't around before. What's he like?
He's charismatic, but he's a gambler, a drinker. He shows up with his girlfriend, Xandra, and insists on taking Theo to Vegas to live with them.
Wow, so from the Barbours to the glitz and chaos of Las Vegas, what's life like with his dad?
It's a whole different world. Theo feels totally out of place in Larry's modern, impersonal house. And he soon finds out that his dad has traded alcohol for Vicodin, and Xandra uses cocaine. It's a pretty dangerous and unstable environment for a teenager, especially one who's already been through so much.
Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Does he at least make any friends?
He does. He meets Boris, a boy his age who's also lost a parent, and they connect over that and their messed up families.
I feel like there's a but coming.
But Boris is troubled. He's charismatic, but he also introduces Theo to, like, heavy drinking and drugs and just reckless behavior.
That doesn't sound good.
He is.
I can see how that could be a bad influence.
And it is.
Yeah.
Theo's looking for an escape and connection, so he falls into this lifestyle, and it just makes his life even more complicated.
So what happens with his dad and Xandra?
Well, Larry's gambling debts, they catch up with him. This threatening guy, named Silver, shows up demanding money. And Theo's worried about the painting, so he hides it in his school locker. But Larry's situation gets worse. He wants Theo to contact his mother's lawyer for money, but the lawyer says no.
So Larry's in over his head. What happens to him?
He dies in a car accident, leaving Theo without a parent again.
Oh, that's so sad. What happens to Theo after that?
He feels lost, abandoned, and he decides to run away. He and Boris come up with this plan to steal cocaine and money from Xandra, and before leaving, he gets the Goldfinch from his locker, and he takes a bus back to New York City.
Back to familiar territory, at least. Does he go back to the Barbours?
He doesn't know. He goes to Hobie. He sees him as like a safe place, stable in his crazy life, and Hobie takes him in, no questions asked, and becomes his guardian.
So Hobie really seems to care about him. Does Theo find any peace with Hobie or normalcy?
I mean, to a degree, Hobie gives him stability, guidance. He teaches him how to restore furniture, and Theo finds comfort in that, in their shared love for antiques. But he's still holding on to that secret, the stolen Goldfinch.
So the past is still very present. What happens next for Theo?
Yeah.
So he's found some stability with Hobie, but he's still carrying around this secret, right? How does he deal with that as time passes?
Years go by, and actually Theo ends up becoming Hobie's business partner at the antique shop. And he finds a routine in his work, but then he develops another secret. He starts selling fake antiques to keep the business going.
Another secret. It sounds like he's stuck in this cycle of, like, deceit. Does this one come back to bite him?
It does, yeah. It just creates this unease and adds to his guilt. And around that time, he finds out that Pippa, she's been sent to a school in Switzerland, a school for troubled girls, so their paths separate again. And then he panics because he reads that some paintings from the museum bombing, they've been recovered. So he gets even more scared about having the Goldfinch.
So he's living with this, like, constant fear of getting caught. What does he even do with the painting?
He moves it to a storage locker. So he's physically distancing himself from it, but not emotionally, of course. And then he starts spending more time with the Barbours, especially Kitsy. And their childhood friendship, it grows into something more. And they eventually get engaged.
So it sounds like he's really trying to build a normal life. What about Pippa, though? Does she ever come back?
She does, yeah. Pippa comes back to New York, briefly. And they reconnect right away. But this leaves Theo torn between Pippa and Kitsy.
So he's at a crossroads in his love life, and with this secret about the stolen painting. What happens next?
Right as he's about to start this new life with Kitsy, his past comes back to get him. Boris shows up again out of nowhere, and he has some news that changes everything.
Uh-oh. I bet this isn't good. What does Boris tell him?
Boris basically drops a bomb. He tells Theo that he stole the Goldfinch from Theo back in Vegas, and he replaced it with a book all wrapped up. Theo is stunned. You know, he had no idea. He thought he still had the painting all these years.
What a twist. So all this time, Theo's been holding on to a book, thinking it was this priceless masterpiece. How does he react to that?
He's overwhelmed, angry, and he feels the sense of urgency all over again because Boris thinks he knows where the Goldfinch is, in Europe.
So does Theo go with him?
He does. Even though it's risky and dangerous, he feels like he has to recover the real painting. It's not even about the money anymore. It's about getting back a part of his past, a connection to his mother.
Sounds like a pretty desperate mission. Where does this search take them?
Amsterdam. They end up in Amsterdam. They're hoping to buy the painting from some black market art dealer.
That sounds super dangerous. What kind of people are they dealing with?
Shady people, for sure. Boris is playing a very risky game. He even has a gun, but says it's just for show. Theo suggests going to the police, but Boris says no. He wants to handle it himself.
Classic Boris. What happens when they finally meet this art dealer?
The whole meeting is tense, and they do get the painting, but then things go south really quickly. Theo notices one of the guys there, trying to sneak away.
Doesn't sound good.
And it wasn't. Suddenly, these armed guys burst in. They want the painting back. Gunfire erupts. And in all the chaos, Boris gets shot. And then Theo, he ends up killing one of the thieves.
Wow, that escalated quickly. So do they even get away with the painting?
They do, but Boris is hurt. But he insists on driving Theo back to his hotel, even with the gunshot wound. And then at the hotel, Theo realizes that he left his passport in Boris's car, so now he's stuck in Amsterdam.
So he's in a foreign country, just had a shootout, and has this stolen masterpiece. That's got to be overwhelming. What does he do?
He's filled with guilt and fear, just everything. He tries to kill himself with pills.
Oh, wow. Does it? Does he?
No, luckily. He wakes up on Christmas. And Boris shows up soon after, which is a huge relief to Theo. And he gives him this bag full of cash.
Like, where on earth did Boris get all that money?
This is where the story takes another turn. Boris admits that he planned everything. The meeting with the art dealer, the fake robbery, even getting shot.
He planned it all. Why would he do that?
He says it was for the best. He had tipped off the authorities about the painting so they could recover a bunch of stolen masterpieces, including the Goldfinch. He saw it as a way to, make up for his past. He even gives Theo some of the reward money and his passport so he can go home.
So Boris, this wild card, becomes like this unlikely art world hero. What happens when Theo gets back to New York?
He has another reckoning because Hobie, Lucius Reeve had visited him, remember him? The guy who accused Theo of stealing the Goldfinch in the first place. So now Hobie knows about Theo's fake antiques and about the stolen painting. And Theo tells him everything about the bombing, the theft, Boris, Amsterdam, all of it.
So all his secrets are out. How does Hobie react?
He's actually really understanding. He sees all the pain and guilt that Theo's been holding inside for years, and he helps him come up with a plan. Theo will use his reward money to buy back all the fake antiques he sold so he can clear his conscience.
Sounds like a long process, but at least he's trying to right his wrongs. Does it work?
It does. He spends the next year traveling around, finding those fake antiques and buying them back. It's like this journey of redemption, finally letting go of his past so it can move on.
It's a pretty bittersweet ending, it sounds like.
Yeah.
He's been through so much loss, but he's also gained so much understanding about himself. So what happens to Theo after he finishes buying back those fakes?
The book ends with him back in New York, thinking about his life and how much the Goldfinch has impacted him. I mean, he's dealt with so much loss. He's made bad choices and been caught up in a world of lies and danger. But through it all, he learns about forgiveness, beauty, and how powerful art can be.
So the Goldfinch isn't really about a stolen painting at all. It's about grief, guilt, redemption, and trying to find meaning in a world that can be so cruel and random. What about the actual painting, though? Where does it end up?
The book leaves that open. Theo thinks it was returned to where it belongs, but we don't know for sure.
Huh, interesting. It's like Tartt wants us to focus on the journey. You know, how Theo is changed by all this, more than what happens to the physical painting. It seems like the Goldfinch, it really dives into what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of right and wrong.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, throughout the book, you see all these characters, and they're not all good or all bad.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that simple. They're just people dealing with tough stuff and making choices. Some good, some not so good.
Yeah, Theo, for example, he's the main guy. But he does some pretty questionable things, like stealing the painting in the first place.
Yeah.
And then making those fake antiques. But you still feel for him, you know?
Exactly, and that's what makes it so interesting. Tartt doesn't try to make her characters perfect. She shows them with all their flaws, and it makes you think about your own judgments. It's those flaws and what happens because of their choices, that's what drives the story.
Like she's saying life isn't black and white, it's messy.
Yeah, exactly. And you know those consequences. They don't just affect the person who made the choice, they affect everyone around them too.
Right. Like with Theo's relationships, with Boris, Hobie, Pippa, even the Barbours. But even with all the bad stuff and the bad choices, there are these moments of hope, like people finding redemption.
Definitely. And a lot of those moments, they have to do with art. Theo's love for art, his connection with Hobie, even his feelings for Pippa, they all remind you that there's still beauty and good things in the world, even when things are hard.
It's interesting how the painting, the Goldfinch, is like this symbol throughout the whole story. It seems to mean something different to everyone.
You're right. For Theo, it's like a piece of his mom. It comforts him, but he also feels guilty about it. For Boris, it's just something to use to get ahead. And Hobie, it represents how fragile beauty is, how we need to protect it.
Yeah, all those different meanings just add so much to the story. What do you think is the most important part of the Goldfinch?
I think it's how she shows how one horrible event can affect a person's whole life. You know, It shapes their choices, their relationships, even who they are. Theo's story shows how strong people can be, but also how hard and complicated it is to heal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. The whole healing process, it can take so long. This has been a really great deep dive. The Goldfinch, it's definitely more than just about a stolen painting. It's about loss, love, redemption, and how powerful art can be.
Absolutely. It's one of those books that makes you think long after you finish it.
And to everyone listening, if you haven't read The Goldfinch yet, you should definitely check it out. It's an amazing journey. It really makes you think about what it means to be human. That's all the time we have for today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.